Hi, I'm Patrick from Douglas Fir Design. I've had a bunch of different chisels over the years, and about a year ago I bought a set of these Narex chisels. They're made in the Czech Republic, and I've been really happy with them. I've been able to keep them really sharp all the time. It's a really high quality steel which makes sharpening easier, which I do really frequently, but it also means that they keep their edge for a lot longer, and that just makes all of the work I do simpler and cleaner, safer. So yeah, I think they've been really useful. For sharpening these chisels, I use these Japanese water stones. This one is a combination stone, has a 1000 grit and a 6000 grit, and so I use them both. I keep the stone flat by using these diamond plates. It's a 600 grit diamond plate, and that's really important. There's plenty of videos that'll tell you how to sharpen a chisel in lots of different ways. Everyone has their way that they're happy with, but it is really important to keep them sharp all the time. I sharpen them in the middle of the job, at the start, and sometimes a couple of times as I go. So it's as simple as once they're already sharp, a few passes at the whetstone on the back, and keeping that bevel, a few passes on the front. And I find that if I do that constantly, it means that I don't really have to do a big sharpen at all. It's just constant little sharpenings throughout the job. With a nice set of chisels like this, it's really important to use a wooden mallet instead of a metal hammer. If you do use a metal hammer, you'll find that you're damaging the ends, you'll split the timber, and can also do damage to the edge that you've worked very hard to keep sharp. I made this hammer myself. I tacked some very thick leather on the ends, and that softens the blows a little bit further. I find that if I'm having to hit harder than that, then I'm probably doing the wrong thing, or I should be using a different tool. I'm cutting a little notch out of a piece of Tassie oak here, and so that requires some cuts directly through the grain as well as with the grain, and that requires a different amount of force. As you're pushing the chisel with the grain, you can generally do it by hand, and you've got to be really careful that it's not going to split the wood like that has just done there. When you're pushing the chisel against the grain, it's much tougher and it can blunt the chisel really quickly. And I find that I like to do, you try and keep the chisel perfectly straight, support it so that you're not bending it as you're hitting it. Give it a couple swift whacks and then clear out the waste that you've created. I can usually do that by hand. And I find that if I do that and I keep the chisel straight, I'm not damaging the edge. And as long as I sharpen it once or twice throughout this process, the whole thing goes pretty quickly. There's a pretty big variety of chisels out there, and 95% of the time or more, I'm just using this set of beveled edge chisels. This Narex set comes with 6 chisels from 32mm down to this really small one, which is 6mm, and I find for almost everything I do, that's all that I need. Even though these 6 chisels in the set are essentially the same shape, each of them is a different width. The simplest reason for that is if you want to do a really wide cut, you might want to use the wide one as opposed to the narrower one. The other thing that's important is when you have a really nice flat base on these wide ones, it allows you to use that as a reference and stay in a really straight line. Whereas if you're using the really narrow one, it's a bit easier to dig in side to side or at the wrong angle because you just don't have quite as much material to rest on. But sometimes for really, really small cuts or really delicate work, you do need to use a 6mm chisel. There's also this box set of 4 beveled chisels. The difference you'll notice is that they're shorter than all of the standard bevel chisels that I use most of the time. And they're also designed to be used right in your palm and not be struck with a hammer. They're smaller and they're shorter, which means you can get into tighter spaces and just do finer work than you might be able to with a really long chisel like that. This is a cranked neck paring chisel. It's similar in the bevel to all of these other chisels, except that you'll notice that the handle comes off an angle from the blade. What that allows me to do is actually keep the handle out of the way if I'm doing some work where I need to get down really close. You'll also notice that slides along the top. With a standard chisel, I'm going to get about halfway in and the handle is going to hit the material. And that's where these guys come in really handy. These two are long paring chisels, and you'll notice that the blades are significantly longer than all the other chisels we've looked at. That allows us to do a number of things. One of them is very similar to this crank handle chisel in that it allows us to keep the blade on a long cut without the handle interfering at all. That's especially useful if you're trying to cut either a deep, long sliding dovetail or a sliding mortise and tenon joint like this one, where the handle from one of these chisels would stop you halfway, whereas you'll notice with one of these, you could easily get the whole way through it, and that allows you to keep the blade on the surface without any interference with the handle. This is a square-edged mortising chisel. You'll notice that as well as being really narrow, it's also got a really thick blade, and what that allows you to do is get material out of a really deep, narrow mortise without the risk of the blade bending like you might have if you were using a much smaller standard beveled edge chisel like this one. These are also square-edged mortising chisels. They actually perform a pretty similar function to the beveled edge, but with the square edge it allows you to get a more accurate reference on the side of a mortise than you might with a beveled edge chisel. All of these Narex chisels, as well as the Japanese Waterstones, can be bought online at timbecon.com.au and also the Melbourne and the Perth stores.